Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jasleen, and I'm a senior manager with Startup India team. Today, we have with us Mukesh Bansal, a serial entrepreneur and founder of Myntra and CureFit. He's also written a book, No Limits: The Art and Science of High Performance. Mukesh, welcome and thanks for joining us and sparing your precious time. I think before we start, we all know CureFit is a name which has become synonymous to fitness. And I'm sure all our audience would also like to know how has been the journey till now.
Thanks, Jasleen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to be on this panel and want to assure you that Jasleen, I didn't color coordinate our clothes. It's just a pure accident. um, sorry, Jasleen, so where would you want me to start? What was your first question?
Okay, so my first question is from Kshitij. His question is, after this lockdown gets over and business start working, everyone will want to save money and keep expenses low. So service-based business will have a hard time getting new work, and product-based business won't get much sales. How to tackle this?
Right. So yeah, I think this is a pretty tough question. I think we are all trying to figure out the state of crisis, but few things are starting to become clearer now that the some form of crisis will stay with us for at least few quarters, until the permanent solution will only be when the vaccination is found, which is easily 9 to 12 months away. I think after we flatten the curve, I think, and the Indian government is obviously doing a really good job of ensuring that we are being very, very proactive about this. But as we uh, slowly start to lift restrictions on movement, many form of business activity will resume, perhaps not the same level as before. And then, but we'll all still need to be very cautious, about, let's say, gathering, public places, which will impact on retail industry, travel industry, and so on. So I think one should, as a startup founder, you should assume that this situation is like to last for 12 to 18 months. And your key priority should be, first priority is just surviving, right? Sometime during crisis time, if you just don't survive, no matter what happens later on, you can't take advantage of that. So that's first and foremost. So whatever your cash balance is and the cost structure, you should look at it carefully and see if you can bring it down significantly and give yourself 12, 15, 18-month runway. Second, while the business may be slow, this is a great time to focus on some of the fundamentals of business. You can rethink your product proposition. You can rethink about stuff that's working, things which are not working. You can, take care of a lot of foundational elements, which, when we are running fast, we don't take care of that. So this is a great opportunity to make the product, significantly better. So if you outlast the crisis and emerge out of the crisis, much better product or service, you will be, great situation to take advantage of the new environment. And this is a story that has played itself out many times. A lot of outstanding companies come out of crisis time. So there could be more than silver lining from this, and provided you have to outlast the crisis.
Great. With this, moving on to our next question, which is from Vijay. The black swan note of Sequoia probably created more fear among the investors. How would you justify that while COVID-19 has less than 5% mortality rate, if we are to take out Italy and Spain, then the global average is less than 3%, and that VC such as Sequoia are scared to invest despite raising USD 1 billion for risk investment in Indian startups?
No, I think the spirit. I think behind that note probably is I mean, in startup and entrepreneur circle, we hear about the saying "only the paranoid survive." There's a book of same name also, which Andy Grove, who was the chairman of Intel, wrote a while back. I think when you enter a period of uncertainty, being paranoid, being cautious and conservative, will make sure that you are avoiding any common pitfalls. When you're in a situation where you don't know how long the crisis may last, it's very important for you to be ready to be able to deal with some of the future uncertainty that may come in this environment. So I think that's what probably what Sequoia note was referring to. I think most of the VCs that I know, they have excellent portfolios in India, and they are long term committed to supporting, backing those companies. So you may not see a lot of deals happening this month, next month, but that doesn't mean that funds are not supporting their companies. In fact, many funds are going out of their way to make sure that the company has as long a runway as they need to survive the crisis. And if they are doing any cost-cutting measures, the VCs are also um, creating efforts to support people who are potentially getting affected. So yeah, there is, and the VC business, like entrepreneurship, is a long-term game. It takes 5 to 10 years to produce a meaningful product and differentiator. So 6 to 12 months is really not in that overall scheme of things. So there's no rush to do deals immediately or deploy more capital. It's just that there is a new situation. One needs to adjust to this new situation and be ready to play the long term game.
Okay. Next question is from Ravi Kiran. How will sports and fitness industry manage to survive post the lockdown, especially when social distancing is a concern for team sports and coaching academy, especially for kids?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it is a concern in the short to medium term, and you are right that we will not see a lot of group activities, gathering in movie halls, for example, or malls or retail outlets open immediately, but it's also, they will not remain shut forever either, right? I think life will slowly come back to adjust to a new normal, and perhaps a new normal will be healthier normal for all of us, right? Maybe like airport security check, we may have better health checks in the airport. A lot of us who travel frequently are also used to falling sick during travel. Perhaps that will go down significantly. I think general hygiene habits will go up. And just taking example of a cult, maybe when we reopen, for some time, instead of having 25 people a class, we might have only 15 people a class, right, with some more distance. We may have longer break between two classes, so we can do deep sanitization before next group comes in, so there is no chance of one group infecting other. We may have things like maybe your entry door is different than exit door, and so on. So I think everyone, according to each business, people will innovate. They will see like how do we provide safe, clean, hygienic environment and reducing chance of infection. As I said earlier, until vaccination is found, the number of COVID cases will not go to zero. So it will be like one of many diseases around us. The only thing we need to be adjust to learn to live with it, understand the risk, minimize the risk, and then slowly start returning back to normal. I think all the governments will want that. It's very important to have the economic engine for the country and the world going on. The livelihood of millions and billions of people depend on it, right? So people can't stay at home forever with the economic engine completely at halt. So I think most likely from 1 or 2 months onwards, things will start to resume slowly. The circular that was released by the government yesterday already has a lot of industries which can resume operations. So that's a good initial sign, and I think other industry will follow suit, just slowly but definitely over the next few months.
Great. I think it's a very important point for any startup. It's a challenge for them to pivot their model and get adjusted to the current situation to minimize their loss. And this is going to be a very valuable input for everyone. Moving on to the next question from Rajesh. In a world where marketing is treated as a percentage spend of revenue, how does one go about spending on building a brand without risking the business model, especially as a startup?
Yeah, I think I think it's not necessarily true that brand building can only happen when you invest huge amount of money. Before CureFit, I worked in Silicon Valley for 10 years. I was part of a lot of startups, and all of us know so many big brand names that have come out of Silicon Valley, right? And if you go back and study their history, none of it was about spending a lot of money to build brand. It was about building highly differentiated customer experience. It was about building product driven growth hacks. So there are a lot of innovation, ingenuity, right kind of positioning for in Silicon Valley. We have this kind of mantra we call product is marketing. If your product is really good, it will market itself. If anyone who uses it will tell 5 other people, right? So which you can measure through word of mouth, NPS, etc. I mean, we are seeing one example for us at Cult. During the crisis time, our social media engagement has just gone through the roof. And the reason for that, we are able to post a lot of very relevant content. Our marketing teams are working around the clock. They're able to come up with a lot of very, very relevant content and engage with our audience in a novel ways, and customers are really enjoying it. It doesn't cost all that much money, but requires proactiveness and ingenuity. So I think, and especially for startups, I don't think startups think at all about spending money on brand building. I think first few years has to be about building outstanding products with very, very clear differentiation. There's one more model, one can see, it's called 1000 true fans. So if you build a product, can you acquire 1000 true fans, people who truly love your product and willing to talk to anyone they meet about it. If you are not able to get those 1000 true fans, if just by spending money you are able to gain hundreds of thousands of customers, eventually they will abandon your product because product wasn't that good that could attract that word of mouth. So I think brand marketing spend etc are much later in the startup life cycle, when your product you're way beyond product market fit. Your customers like your product. Now you're only trying to get the reach across large set of users, and that's when you need to raise money in sizable amount and think about spending money in customer acquisition and brand building.
Sure. And I think Karma has been successfully able to gather a lot of new and loyal customers, especially during the pandemic and especially during this crisis. Okay, moving on to the next question. So this is from Mahesh Dharam. What are the terms in the term sheet of which we should be extra careful from a founder's perspective? And are there any points which need to be added for the founder's interest protection?
Yeah, I think when it comes to term sheet, shareholder agreements, etc., I think one should like most things, there's no point starting from scratch. If you look at in India now, thousands of early stage deals would have happened. So it should be very easy to find. Basically, the key thing for me, what are the standard terms, right? And by default, you should not do anything which is non-standard. Either way, a non-standard for investors' favor. If there are some terms which are very onerous, let's say very stringent liquidity preference. Liquidity preference is whenever company gets sold out, whether investor get 1x of their money, 2x, 3x. So there are standard terms around that. So I think negotiation tactic should be, let me just first find out what the standard terms are, and that's what you ask for the investors. Similarly for yourself, you should not ask for rights which are usually not given by the investors. And if there is an unusual ask either by the investor or by an entrepreneur, then there is a very strong reason for it. There has to be something very unique about the situation which warrants that non-standard thing to come in. I think this is where Startup India can also be helpful. Just publishing standard term sheet documents, standard shareholder documents, and there are 8-10 key terms. Sometimes early stage entrepreneurs may not understand those terms. Like what are the liquidity preference, what is ROFR, ROFO, and how does voting rights work, and so on. So Justine, maybe even some good I'm sure you guys must be already doing that, so that information can be available as a public good to entrepreneurs. And I'll just say just ask around. I'm sure you will have people from your batch, seniors, who would have raised money or gone through early stage term sheet. Just get a draft from that, how their term sheet was, and use that as a template for negotiation.
So just to add on to your point and for the benefit of all, you can visit our website startupindia.gov.in. We have uploaded a lot of templates and resources for the benefit of startups. And not only this, we also have onboarded a lot of resource partners like legal, AWS, and for a lot of other startup aspects who can support you in your journey on a pro bono basis. So do create your profile and avail the benefits. Okay, so next question is from Raghavendra Raj Singh. A startup can easily mean 12 hours of non-stop work, odd hours of work, and the feeling that every minute alive, awake, conscious, dedicated to work and project. With very few 24/7 gyms or odd hour gyms, and that feeling of giving all time possible to work, ignoring physical exercise can be an excuse. What is your solution to it? Do you plan to start or already have any online gym or physical training sessions through video chat, personal or group, which one can avail?
Right. I mean, the first I'll say, startups should not be about 12 hours non-stop work. It's if you have to run a marathon, you will not go all out and then get exhausted after first 10 minutes and sitting by the sidewalk watching other people go by. I think startups are very much like marathon. I mean, it takes, minimum 5 years, more often 8 to 10 years to really build a useful product and sizable business. So you need to pace yourself. You need to mentally be aware that this will take a while, and the journey will not be straight line. There'll be good days, bad days, sometimes good years and bad years, for many of the companies, I mean, you guys are startups right here, but think about large company, let's say in travel space, where entire revenue, becomes zero. It's a, massive crisis, but good companies will survive that. They will readjust, take stock of things, they'll figure out, where they need to save cost or pivot and so on. So I just don't, I mean, yeah, you can every now and then you can work 12 hours, no problem with that, but that's not something I think one should do on a daily basis. There needs to be a balance. You have to take care of your health. Jocelyn mentioned, my book, one of the key things I'd argue about that, in to have good productivity, you need a good health. The good health provides the foundation for productivity. Otherwise, you're working long hours, but you're still mentally exhausted. You are not able to focus. So you have hours in terms of quantity, but not productivity in terms of output. So health is, super important, and there are tons and tons of options available online. I mean, for us, just you can use the CureFit app. We have so many free workouts available, pretty much, uh, morning 6 a.m. till, midnight, and very soon 24 hours. They are, and just, but obviously, it's not restricted to CureFit. There are so many, awesome workouts available on YouTube. A lot of people who are gaining a lot of followership. So if you have mindset and you are willing to set aside, whether it's 10 minutes to meditate, or a quick, high intensity workout for 20 minutes, or a proper, bodyweight workout or yoga session for an hour, everything is available online these days.
And I think I just read an article. There was this Economic Times article, I believe, where you also mentioned that how you make sure that you get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and you also switch to meditation since your college days. So this could be one of the best practices for not only any startup but in general as well, that anybody should be
No,
adopting.
I will very strongly recommend. I think, and thankfully, because of CureFit journey, I have a lot of exposure into world of health now. What health experts say, what is, generally commonly accepted wisdom around health. And I think there is a huge consensus that, 7 8 hours of sleep is almost essential. If you don't do that, you're almost like, it's like, borrowing from future. It's like a credit card. You will pay for that with huge amount of interest in terms of, future health, future productivity. Anyone can, you can get by on few hours of sleep for a few days, few weeks, but the long-term repercussions are definitely not worth it. If those of you are interested, you can check out this book called Why We Sleep. It's become a somewhat of an authority on the whole science of sleep. What do we know about sleep? What it does to our, mind, body, productivity. It's I think sleep is just essential. Meditation also is very helpful. I mean, and the good thing about meditation, you can even meditate for 1 minute. You don't have to do for long, for half an hour meditation. But whether it's 1 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute, there are outstanding apps like Calm, Headspace. Again, in MindFit section of Cure, we have a bunch of DIY meditation. So, or you can just focus on your breathing or walk in nature, whatever way you like. But startups are, like, it's mental labor, right? We don't physically lift stuff or carry things around. It's our mind which basically doing all the work, while body just, sitting idle on the chair, literally. So to keep your mind in top shape, things like sleep, meditation, exercise are just, extremely important. I can't overemphasize, how critical those things are.
Sure. Okay, moving on to the next question from Shreya. We are a Bangalore-based startup. We are into blockchain development of COVID supply and disposal chain software until bio-waste is disposed of in incinerators. We are bootstrapping and would like some advice regarding equity or finance.
Regarding
Equity or finance. It's basically financing. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I think in general, if assuming you are not a profitable company, first of all, you really won't have too many debt options available. So for early to mid-stage startups, equity is, I think, the best option. Yes, sometimes you dilute significantly, but your financing partner is sharing the risk the risk in the early stage is very high. Company may or may not work out. And if you, let's say, at all able to take debt from somebody, right, someone known to you, friend, family, and things don't work out, you will basically, you are liable to pay back that debt, which may not be very pleasant situation. If you are, if it's from a bank or some financial organization, they can go after you legally. If it's a friend's family, you are still, kind of obligated to them to return that money. So I think equity is a great way to share risk. You be transparent about your business model, product, ambition, and the person who's willing to partner you, they partake in the equity risk, right? And if the product or company is successful, they will benefit from the upside. If it is not successful, that's a risk they took willingly. So at least there will be no hard feelings, and for you as an entrepreneur, you will have a fresh start. That chapter is done and dusted. You can maybe start something again new if at all the situation arises. So I think in most situations, the early stages, equity is the right way to go. Having said that, in certain sectors, if it is certain social impact sectors, there are some government programs around grants. Some of the NGO organizations are also open to providing grants, especially in the space of health, education, climate, uh, girl child, and so on. So if you're solving something in those areas, you should make a list of the relevant both governmental and non-governmental organization and go pitch to them. If you're able to get a grant, that's great. Grant is in some way even better than equity, because you're really not diluting anything. It's just that a social organization is saying that what you're doing is quite important. We are willing to give you money without really any expectation of return. And so that's, you should pursue. You mentioned this particular question about doing something in the biodegradable space. So the NGOs focused on the climate, might be interesting having a conversation with you. So that's beyond equity. That's other avenue you can pursue.
And just to add on to Mukesh's point, there are a lot of state government and central government schemes as well for any particular industry. So you can also reach out to us. We'll also put our email ID in the message box. It's dipp-startups@nic.in. You can reach out to our team. A case officer will be assigned, and we can also support you and guide you about the existing financing schemes. Okay, so next question is from Rutuja Rai. What is your plan of action on cult centers after the lockdown opens?
Right. So as I briefly mentioned earlier, we obviously want to, get back to normal as soon as possible, but we also want to be quite responsible about the current COVID situation. So first and foremost, we just need to wait, until there is a, clarity from the government when, gym services can open. But even after that, initially we'll likely to run classes with much lower attendance, so that people are a lot more spaced apart, and they're maintaining, even while you're doing group workout, you're maintaining enough social distance. We will implement, I think, significantly upgrade our sanitization protocols. We look at, again, the guidelines from the relevant health authorities to make sure we are compliant with that. We might increase, instead of having classes only in the morning, evening, we'll probably run all day classes, so that, because our capacity per class will be less, we will actively explore expanding our footprint, because we believe the need for fitness will only go up. So after things are come back to normal, we'll look at how we can expand our footprint, have a lot more call centers offline, and then just we'll also adjust and adapt according, along with everyone else, and try to get to a point where we can go back to being almost normal at some point in future.
Sure. Okay. So the next question is from Satyadev Tiwari. Considering public memory is short, do you think post COVID-19 there will be any significant change in people's eating habits, favoring healthier options?
Yeah.
What trends will be settling in?
Yeah, I think for a pandemic like this, which is having a global impact, the experience people are going through, they would have never gone through something like this in their past life, or unlikely to go through this again in future as well. So I think the changes that happen during this period will stay, for people during their lifetime. It's almost equivalent to people who might have lived through World War II. I think the changes they would have done, the experience they would live through, I don't think they will ever forget that. I think this is closer to that. And you are right. I think the health awareness for people will, I think, go up significantly. Overall, awareness about hygiene issues, public hygiene, sanitization will go up significantly. Healthier habits will form, and it's I don't think we'll ever go back to the old normal. This not only health space, but in many space. I think, in fact, that's a pretty fascinating area to think. A lot of people are starting to think about what will world look like, and what are things which will change permanently, from climate perspective, from health perspective, work perspective. Maybe work from home will be an integral part of how we all work in future. And things may change for education. So it is one of those massive global event which will fundamentally alter how we function. And within that, I think there are probably a lot of opportunities hidden for entrepreneurs. If you just try to imagine your life 18 months, 24 months from now, and maybe there's a good opportunity to build product and services to be ready for that world, which opportunity might not have existed in the past but now uniquely available. And many of the established companies, they may hold on to their way of working and may not want to alter things fundamentally. So that's where kind of hungry lean startups, willing to experiment, change, might have a leg up on established startups.
Sure. Great. So next question is from Kritika Singh. We see that Cult is offering live session to people throughout the day during the COVID crisis when people are locked at home. What is the idea behind offering the entire range of services for free online? Also, would this continue post the lockdown?
Yeah, I think so. For us, it's also a relatively new product. Currently, see, our first goal was to how do we engage our Cult customers, while they are not able to come work out. So the live classes was solved for that. But we saw that not only Cult customers are coming, but a lot of other people are coming, which is excellent. That's creates a potential future customer base for us. We are thinking through monetization model, and there are some ideas on the table. And I think in the coming weeks and months, we'll figure out, what portion of service can be free, what are paid, etc. That's I think next couple of months that will all start to become much quite clear. But right now, the obviously the focus was to just create a solution for people to engage every day and take care of their health and fitness without having to worry about how to pay, etc. But yeah, I mean, this is obviously not a long-term solution.
Sure. Next question is from Neha Nakbal, and I think this is something which is actually impacting most of the startups. How is CureFit sustaining the human resource cost during this crisis?
See, I mean, fortunately, we are also a very well-funded company with a business model that's working. So, we have the in some ways firepower to outlast this crisis. Right now, everyone is working from home, and we have done a lot of innovation on just ensuring people are productive, changing priorities, and aligning it more with the digital roadmap. So we don't need to really do a whole lot on the people cost, because we think it will be 3 to 6 month phenomena, not longer. But wherever possible, we are obviously actively exploring if we can be a little leaner and save cost in various area of business. I think some of it are slightly confidential, so might not be able to share publicly, but we are trying to optimize for two things: minimize impact on people, as well as ensuring the monthly burns are optimized to the extent possible.
Okay. Next question is from Meghraj Kumar. How is the fitness and wellness industry going to get affected by this COVID crisis? What is your advice to a startup working in fitness and wellness sector in running the business successfully?
Yeah. I think it's a mixed bag for fitness and wellness. And the reason I say mixed is that offline activities will obviously continue to be on pause for a while. And wherever it's a group aggregation of people, those will be among the last services to open. So there's going to be a lull period. During that time, you can't have offline service delivery, therefore no offline revenue. But in fitness and wellness, there are actually numerous use cases which can be delivered digitally. And I think now from the new circular, even at home delivery of services like what Urban Company does, those are also available. So for example, they have a lot of masseurs who can come home for massages and so on. So that's a wellness service. All the beauty service will be available at home. So I think the startups in fitness and wellness space should explore in the near term what service can you offer digitally or at people home. And there are really no restriction if you can figure out the operations, logistics of that, and customer acquisition. At least there are no restriction. The delivery of these service in offline center obviously will have to wait until things come back to normal, which may take some time.
Okay. Next from Manas. Are startup business spending too much capital on discounts to lure customers and hiring expensive staff rather than developing strong products and technology? And is this creating too many unsustainable, dispensable business? Is hyper competition leading to an unproductive spending?
No, see, in the early stage, I don't think, I mean, you raise a lot of money, right? Most of the pre-series A or series A rounds will be in the, 1 crore to 20 crore range. That's not a whole lot of money to spend on discounts or aggressive marketing campaigns. So I don't think in early stages you have much of a choice other than investing that money into improving your product. As grow and as you start to get traction or able to raise a lot more money, you have an opportunity to spend money on unproductive spends. But if you study all the even the startups who have gone on to become large scale, who've been successful, uh, people who only try to grow through by outspending other person, by getting engaged in discount wars, haven't really built a sustainable business, and many of them have not even survived. So it's definitely not a good long-term strategy. Tactically, sometime it may be useful. You'll have to look at I mean, really see what competitive situation you are in and how you want to play. What is your cash situation vis-a-vis that of competition, and sometime there may be a uh, opportunity for you to consider it. But by and large, I don't think it's a good strategy. As far as hyper competition is concerned, I think that's really how capitalism works, right? The more competition, that means more innovation. It is obviously about survival of the fittest, but customers always benefit from it, and the progress and the innovation moves forward. So net, I think more competition, I think, is very well established, is a good thing for most stakeholders.
Okay. So we have a question from Ganesh. Retail has been impacted significantly by this crisis. What would be your three advices for a bootstrapped deep tech startup enabling brands and retailers?
Can you repeat the question, Jaslyn? Didn't hear clearly.
Retail has been impacted significantly by this crisis. What would be your three advices for a bootstrapped deep tech startup enabling brands and retailers?
Yeah, I think so. One is try to understand how will the retail footprint look like in 12 to 18 months from now, and what will be the component of either digital or at home delivery. If you think about it today, everything comes to our home, right? The e-commerce companies deliver a lot of products at home. Food delivery companies of deliver food at home, right? Urban company delivers the customers, the providers come at home and provide the services. So I think for whichever retail sector you are engaged in, try to push your thinking and seeing what portion of that can be delivered in this mode versus a customer coming to your store, which is a time consuming, traffic issues, parking issues, and so on. Second, you mentioned deep tech, right? So see, deep tech is uh, it always requires a fair bit of incubation period and investing to technology. So if I were a deep tech company, I will see this almost as a blessing, because you can now take 12 months and focus very deeply, actually do deep tech instead of trying to just cobble something together and do have acquire some customers and do product market fit. Just you build, just dig deep, focus on building highly differentiated technology, And when things come back, retailers will be looking for things like, cost cutting, efficiency, customer engagement, and so on. And if you have a highly differentiated product, I'm sure a lot of people will look at it. And I mean, last advice is, same as before, which is just somehow outlast this, right? If any startup that die will not be making a lot of progress later on. So do what you need to do to make sure you are able to outlast the crisis.
Great. We have a question from Sridhar Iyer. How will the industry look at technology budgets? Will they be looking to slash IT budgets or looking at the situation as an opportunity to embrace digital transformation and automation?
Yeah, I think it's more likely to be latter. Answer obviously depends from industry to industry, but for most people in this, remote working environment, and both your employees and customers and suppliers all working remotely, the leveraging digital tools for collaboration, information exchange, cost optimization will be even more important. So, I mean, most of us probably would not even heard of Zoom 4 weeks ago, and now Zoom is as integral as WhatsApp to our life. So I think most likely the demand for innovative technology, which makes functioning in the new world easier and more suitable, whether functioning of employer, employee, customer, vendor, if you can solve something uniquely, the chances are there'll be a lot of buyers for the technology.
Okay, so moving on to the next question from Joseph. How long do you think the fitness industry will take to get back to its normal routine?
Yeah, very difficult to hazard a guess here. But if we by normal we mean absolutely as normal as before, my guess would be 6 to 9 months. That doesn't mean will not start earlier, but it maybe start with a lot of restrictions. So, but yeah, hopefully 6 to 9 months we can be back to how or reasonably close to how life was before. I don't think we're ever going back to pre-COVID life. So let's not wait for that.
Great. Okay, so this question is from Mr. Subramaniam. How can a fashion and lifestyle brand or retailer use technology to amplify the digital dividend, which is available post-COVID scenario?
Yeah.
Can you suggest 3 things they can do apart from augmenting their business with digital platforms?
Yeah, I think one is see, again, in fashion you are always into going to design cycles, etc., right? And this could be one opportunity where you can maybe design your next few drops. At Cult we have a small apparel division as well for Cult Sports, and that's what we are doing. We are having, the team is working through next 5-6 months of design iterations so that they'll be ready for that. We are exploring ways how we can get feedback digitally before we produce something. In fashion lifestyle, if you build a product and put it out there in the retail shelves, and if it doesn't sell, that's a significant loss because the inventory has already been built. So using digital tools, if you can collect feedback ahead of time, that can so you can think about what kind of solutioning you can do in that space. Third is also you can leverage build digital capabilities for sentiment analysis, trend analysis. There are some good providers for this technology. You can build, depending upon your tech DNA of the company, you can build some of these tools in-house as well. And these are the kind of become fundamental capabilities that will stay with you even when things come back to normal.
Okay, so we have a lot of live questions pouring in and especially related to hiring. So one of the question is from Neeraj. He's asking, can you highlight about EatFit business which operates as Cloud Kitchen? How do you go about hiring the unskilled staff and any process that is adopted by the company?
Yeah, we have a by now fairly standardized process. So I mean, it's for in the operations staff, the interview process is a lot more about evaluating the skill. If for a line level cook, we even do the part of interview is to actually see them cook, and someone trained chef will watch and see how they're cooking, and it's about like in a tech interview, sometimes you will have a coding round. So the equivalent of that for respective skill set is an integral part of it. And then That's also augmented by pretty rigorous training program for all of our operational staff. So they are trained on the right processes. They are trained in the live environment before we go on the floor and start delivering services on their own.
We have a similar question from Sanchit Garg. Hi, Manish, I have two questions regarding recruitment. How do you attract top talent, especially at an early stage? How do you hire talent in areas which are not your strength?
What was the first question?
How do you attract top talent, especially at an early stage?
Yeah, I think at early stage, it's really boils down to selling two things. Either you sell the vision of the company. If you are trying to do something, really path breaking, there are enough people around, high caliber, ambitious people who want to work on high impact projects. So if you are able to articulate that vision very, very clearly and then evangelize it in your immediate circle, your ex colleagues and so on, you will find that people are willing to consider it. Second thing, the same thing on the technology side. If you're solving a unique technology problem, a lot of engineers get excited by with that, and you can build a crack tech team if your problem statement is very clear. um, uh, Also, I think subtle factor is just your own passion and conviction. When you talk to people, how passionate you come across, and also your homework. People want to do something ambitious, but people have also they want to be cautious. So if you've done your homework, you're able to articulate what is the industry, market opportunity, addressable market, initial use case and so on. If you try to recruit someone with just kind of vague vision of changing the world, but not able to also articulate the ground reality, it will not uh, inspire people or give them confidence. For things which are not your natural strength, the key thing is to hire at least one senior leader with that strength. It is hard, if you are a mostly a technology company, you want to hire a very good marketing person or marketing team, or vice versa. You should get at least one senior leader who other people can look up to, because in addition to compensation company, people also pay a lot of attention to who will I work with, what will the environment like, and will I learn from that or not. So just finding somehow, and that's not easy, but getting a good person who comes with a deep understanding of that space is your first breakthrough, and then you can build a team around that person.
Great. Next question is from Pratik Sarogi. Since you have 300 plus Cult Fit and Mind Fit centers, how are you managing the cash flow in this aspect? Are you still paying the rent and salaries?
Yeah, so obviously we are paying salaries. On rent front, we are renegotiating with vendors. A lot of our many of these commercial agreements has a clause known as force majeure, which means if there is a catastrophic event of any kind, which renders impossible to conduct business, then some of the terms of the agreement may not be valid anymore. So we are invoking that and going back to our landlords and renegotiating rents, and the salary of we are continuing to pay for all our employees.
Okay. So Vikas is asking, I'm keen to know of your journey from fashion, e-commerce to healthcare and fitness.
Well, I mean, the journey is still going on. There was a brief, the short break between after I moved on from Flipkart and started CureFit along with Ankit Nagori. Most of that time was spent, one is just reading a lot, focusing on my own health and fitness a lot more, and ideating about various possibilities. I looked at education and health quite closely and decided to pursue health. From kind of heights of Flipkart, day one of CureFit was quite sobering. We're back to a small house with just 3-4 of us, and from there slowly building the company. I think it's been quite enjoyable and rewarding. Kind of really the journey, apply the lessons of the past, avoid mistakes that we might have done in the past, and also just be learn a lot about new industry. I I'm quite passionate about health and fitness in general, and CureFit has given me that opportunity to learn deeply about this space. But it's still very early in our journey. I mean, it'll be 10 plus years, so there's a lot of milestones yet to come.
Okay. So Raghavendra is asking, we are a Mumbai-based health tech startup. We are working on some innovative medical devices. Some are beneficial during COVID-19 and some are after. We would like to know what should be the right way to approach investors now when investors are holding on their liquidity.
I think, it'll be tough to raise fresh money in this environment. If you have an angle, if there are companies which are raising money in this environment, but their pitch is that, look, because of either situation or our unique product, we are in a good position to take advantage of current situation. If something would have taken us 2 years, we can now do in 1 year or 6 months, because this has changed about our business reality. So for example, for CureFit, digital was always part of our roadmap, but we would have had big numbers only after a few years. But the situation has changed that fundamentally. Now we can have massive digital engagement with our users and acquire a lot more other users for a digital engagement, who probably would have never gone to uh, physical fitness. So think about that aspect. What is the unique is, do you benefit disproportionately from current situation? Somehow, other example, medicine delivery companies are benefiting, or grocery delivery companies are benefiting. So for those companies to go talk to investors, it becomes a different conversation. They are no longer raising money for what they were doing before, but in an altered reality, which is more beneficial to them, and therefore investors are likely to listen.
And I think investors are also supporting the situation. We've heard from you about the ACT fund as well, which the INR 100 crore fund, which has been launched, and how they are actually supporting the startups in this time. Great. So we're running out of time, and we'll take a quick last question from Akshay. What do you think about immersive tech like VR, AR, or MR in fitness? Is this the future? Is this the future given the situation?
No, I think it's a very exciting space, and AR VR will play a huge role in fitness. There is no two ways about it. I think the reason it is not already taken off in a big way is the AR VR technology are still in, they are quite cumbersome and quite expensive. So they have not reached the mass market scale. So there needs to be, from the deep tech companies working in the space, there need to be some massive consumer breakthrough. Like, Oculus is a good start, but still, reasonably expensive, not available everywhere, not enough content, not even particularly safe when it comes to, fitness kind of use cases using Oculus. But it's only a matter of time. I think the technology is getting better every year, and for us as a fitness provider, the virtual reality is is the holy grail, right? If you can offer a cult like experience at home, or even better, we create a using AR, it's a group class, but in the foothill of Himalayas, or on the beach kind of experience. People will love it. Just takes the experience to a whole new level. So we as a company will be watching these technologies and hoping that they accelerate faster, so we can incorporate them into what we do. But I'm sure a lot of people, other folks, can innovate and build a solution around them.
Great. Sorry, we are running out of time. Thank you, Mukesh, for your valuable inputs. This has been an extraordinary session, and it was a pleasure hosting you. Thank you, everyone who joined us for this session. You've been a great audience, and we at Startup India DPIIT hope to help you sail your startup journey smoothly. We'll end the session and keep you informed about our upcoming webinars. Take care and have a great day. Thank you.
Jasleen, and thank you everyone who's on this call. Wish you all the best and stay safe. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.